A quick note before we get into the episode. Oversharing is a podcast for entertainment purposes only. It is not a medical podcast and does not constitute medical or psychological advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or mental health professional. Hello and welcome back to Oversharing. I'm Jordana Abraham.
And I am Dr. Naomi Bernstein.
How is it going?
I missed you last week. You were gallivanting
throughout Europe. Yes.
Amazing. How was your trip? I saw photos. It looks so... I just want to start off. I want to hear about your trip, but I want to start off and say, I think it's incredible that your group of friends manages to get their shit together and go on vacation with all the partners and do it. It's so hard. I give you guys a lot of credit.
Thank you. Thank you. I am very proud of like that that we pull it off every year pretty much, or usually every year.
I imagine there's schedules and some of them have kids and there's childcare and just like so many moving pieces.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, like, I know, we've talked about how like you would want to do more trips like that, or you're talking about like planning a girls trip. And I'm telling you, the big mistake people make is like polling 10 people and their partners.
Yeah.
Because that's just too many people. You need like the 3 people who are the most gung-ho, the most down, and you get them committed. And then the 3 or the 6 of you, if you're doing partners, you pick the dates and you plan the thing, and then you send, and then you still invite everyone, but you say, this is where we're going. You guys are all welcome to come. So it's like, you can't let everyone have an opinion. That's sort of where things go crazy.
And then you play on people's FOMO too, because it's like the idea of planning the trip probably feels daunting, but once everyone knows it's happening,
yes,
and they're afraid of missing out, they're probably like, we got to make this work.
Yeah. And then they do, which is nice. And then I also really enjoy, so we did a group trip for like 3 nights, and then Mike and I went to Ibiza, and then Mike and I went to Portugal for a week on our own. And I did actually, what I do when we've done this before, and I do really like getting both on a trip. I do think it's very fun because there's certain parts where like, we travel well together. We do, but he likes to like sleep late. I'm kind of more about like, I'm out and about and I want to be like in the sun and doing things.
Right.
So it's nice when we're sharing a house with 10 other people. He can kind of do what he wants to. I can go hang out with my friends early in the morning, let him sleep. And it is fun to be able to just have like a group memory and then have your own quality time separately. But it doesn't have to be all 2 of you. I'm sure. I don't know how the longest you and Jeff have been away together is. Probably not that long since you've had kids.
Yep, exactly.
But by the end of like a 10-day trip together, we're sitting at dinner like, what have we not discussed? I don't think there's anything we haven't talked about. We could talk about the food, but like, we got a lot in. So
totally.
It's nice to have like a bigger group, a little more drama, a little more excitement, a little more like variables.
So fun. It looked really, really nice. I'm happy for you. That's the goal. It is hard. I just really tough. We've talked about this before. It's tough to prioritize outside of your own nuclear family. Like it's tough. It's so stupid when I think about it. I'm like, oh, well, like this one has a piano recital and this one has a football game. And,
right.
Obviously getting childcare at a time that's convenient for the people that are doing it. It just,
childcare, yeah.
Right. It just feels really tough. But I think if you make it a priority in your life to maintain friendships, to, really feel like if I don't spend time with these people, this friendship isn't going to like real quality time. It's very different than like, okay, we go to dinner and we go home.
Right. No, it is because you're together for a while. And I think it is worth like, again, I think we talked about this. Doesn't seem obvious that those friendships are worth putting aside PTO for, planning for, but I do think they are. I do think it revitalizes you in a different kind of way. And I think the name of the game, kind of like what I said before, is planning very far ahead.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously on short notice, people who have kids or people who have a lot more responsibilities. Even me this was my first time doing one of these trips with the dog, and that
Right.
added a big extra layer of like coordinating and making sure Mike's
Totally.
parents watched him, but like that they were free and that we have to
Aw.
get him there and then pick him up. So I do think just like if you have enough time, you can do anything. If you have
Yeah.
enough lead time.
I'm motivated. I'm
Yeah,
gonna make it happen.
I
All of
think you
you out
should.
there that I've been lightly like tapping on the window, I'm gonna pick 2 and
I'm
we're gonna
telling
do
you.
it.
Two for
Yeah.
3 people, because 3 people is like if it's just
That's
three
a trip.
people, that's a great honestly,
That's a girl's trip.
two
Yeah.
pe 2 is like a little aggressive, I think, because then
Yeah.
again, you're like going on a romantic getaway with a friend.
Yeah.
3 is
Right.
like I think 3 plus is a nice number.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I would like even when I came to New York, um, a few weeks ago, I just had one friend come in and we had a blast, just the 2 of us. So that's recharging also if you can't get everybody together. There's something about like an overnight, a wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
that's different than like let's meet for dinner in and out. So I'm motivated. The trip looked awesome. You have such wonderful lifelong friendships. It's really that you maintain and you pour your heart into. And I think they do the same. And it's really, really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very proud of my adult friendships. It feels very natural, but I guess it is work when you think about it, like any other relationship.
Yeah.
It's like something if someone does something that annoys you, kind of working through that instead of just being like, I'm just gonna because it's so easy with a friend as opposed to a partner to just be like, I'm just not gonna hang out with them
Right.
that much because they're like annoying me.
Now you work through it. And being in
Yeah.
the same place, I think helps.
Definitely,
I think you
definitely. Yeah.
got lucky that a lot of your friends throughout your life, like you kind of have gotten on the same path. And like in terms of where you decided to live and,
Right.
lay
No, that's
roots
true.
and all that. Like I didn't realize it at the time, after college and like my friend group kind of exploded across the whole
Country.
United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And so everyone's in different places. And at the time it felt like, okay, no big deal. We'll visit each other. It'll be great. Like we talk all the time. And over time, it's harder and harder. So,
I agree. So I think it is work, but worth it. I think it's the kind of thing where it seems like I could just not, but it is. I think if you put the effort into it, you do see the rewards, and your social circle. I do think determines the quality of your life, how strong
yeah,
not just your relationship with your partner or your kids or whoever is, but also this extended network that does sometimes feel overlooked societally.
100%. Yeah. And that leads us into, I think, one of the questions that we're going to answer here about at least my feelings on ChatGPT as a, confidant. So maybe that's a good segue.
Yeah, let's get into our overshare because I had seen some feedback on a discussion we had earlier where I think you had mentioned something about AI chatbot therapists being helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me read our first overshare. Hi, JNN. You touched on this briefly in a recent episode, but I'm curious to hear a broader conversation on using AI/ChatGPT for therapy. I've been guilty of this myself, and I've asked ChatGPT to act as my therapist since it stores knowledge about me, and I've used it for advice in conflicts with my boyfriend, issues with my anxiety and OCD, etc. But I see this becoming a really dangerous, slippery slope because I find myself believing everything it tells me, and I'm worried it's just validating me no matter what I say. I also know there's a dangerous trend with people falling in love and forming relationships with AI. I'd love to hear what you both think about the psychology component of AI.
So it's interesting because I have a lot of patients, or not a lot, but I've had a handful of patients that, have used it in between sessions, asked it questions, and it comes off as really empathic and gives what sounds like really great answers. And I think in moderation, it's to ask a question every now and then. I think it can be a helpful tool. But if you find that, like, on a daily basis, this is where you're going, that you're using it every day, um, perhaps instead of talking to your partner or a therapist. Like, I think that's where I draw the line. Like, if you're having ChatGPT or chatbot therapy,
Right.
like often, then you should probably
If
seek
you're like
actual therapy.
replacing it with something.
Right.
Yes.
And obviously it's free. It's so tempting. You don't have to pay for it, but there are definitely drawbacks. I mean, there's no professional standards. We've talked about this on here,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
you're trained in all these techniques that AI is not being trained in therapeutic techniques. They're scouring the internet and they're spitting out stuff that's probably on the surface decent advice, but there's no standards of care. There's no one to go to if things don't go right or you're getting advice. And like this listener saying, you can't even, sometimes it just feels like you believe everything that it says, but it doesn't have any professional training at all
Right.
in being a therapist. So I'm glad she's writing in. And I think we were kind of joking about it at the time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to lose my job or whatever. But I do think that it can be really dangerous. And if you're using it, you know, 2 times a year or 3 times a year to ask it a question, great, fine.
Right.
Maybe you
Or
get
yeah.
some info.
Yeah, or if you feel like you're in a panic and you can't speak to someone, and maybe it'll help at least temporarily until you get to your therapy appointment. Let's say your therapy appointment's tomorrow, you're kind of going crazy, something like that. I think it's interesting. It's sort of how I feel about all these technologies is kind of like they're not inherently bad or good. I mean, I guess they're both inherently bad and good, actually. Um, but I do think it's so much more about the way that you use them than they themselves. Like we talk about this a lot on You Up with dating apps.
Right.
And I always liken it to fast food, like McDonald's. Like, is it something you should never ever do? No, like it's helpful in certain scenarios. It's super fast. It's super convenient. If I'm on a road trip, of course I'll have it. If I was using it every day instead of, cooking or eating anything healthy, that's where you start to get sick. That's where that doesn't actually help you thrive. You're not getting the best nutrients from something.
Yes.
Sort of like this. It's like if I'm using it in a crutch when I need it, when I don't have access to a real person, that's super helpful. If I'm using it to replace that, just like dating apps, if I'm using that dating apps and I'm never speaking to a single person that I meet in public anywhere, I could at a bar, I'm on my phone the whole time on the dating app.
Right. Instead of like looking around, you're like, yes, totally.
Then I think it's like you're not using the technology in the correct way with the right. I don't want to say willpower, but I'm trying to think about what the word is. It's like you can use it in certain situations. If I was having a really busy time at work, I think I'd probably be on the apps more if I were dating because I didn't have time to go out and meet people in person. But should that be the only way you're meeting people? I don't think so. I don't think that's the healthiest way to only meet people.
Totally. And the other aspect is I think there is, with all of the technology and AI and everything that we have at our fingertips, there's like this instant gratification, there's like an overdose on instant gratification where, again, for example, if you're my patient, even if you're in one of my groups, so plug for my groups, anyone who is my patient, who's in my groups, who I see for individual therapy, if they have a crisis or they're panicking at any moment, they have access to me. However, and I'm there and I will support anyone who's in my community. But there are a lot of times when people reach out and there's part of the working through process is developing patience and learning that I'm not going to have a whole therapy session with you over text or over email. We'll touch in or I'll respond. We'll have a couple back and forths, but the idea is that you can tolerate the discomfort of whatever's happening and not feel like you're going to go to a chat bot that's going to give you an answer immediately.
Right.
Same thing with sitting at a bar and you're like, okay, there's not enough like attractive people in here that I'm interested in. I'm not getting the instant gratification. So I'm going to just isolate myself, dive into my phone and that need for instant gratification, I think, is really isolating too, because it's sort of like other humans aren't going to be exactly what you want them to be
Right.
all of the time. They're not going to show up exactly when you want them to. They're not going to say exactly what you want them to say. There might be some patience required.
Yeah.
But on your phone, it's bam, 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 bam. You could get exactly what you want, exactly when you want it. And I don't think it's good for people's brain chemistry.
Totally. I mean, I've been seeing all this stuff or reading all this stuff about like the prevalence of porn in certain cultures. And I think that's kind of the issue with it too, is like it's so, especially for a lot of men out there, like it's so easy to just get the instant gratification. You don't have to be rejected by this person. You can get off sexually just by watching something. And now I'm sure it's gotten so good with like AI and all this other
Oh
stuff
gosh, I can't even
where you can
imagine.
have an AI girlfriend. I was watching a movie, I think it was called Companionship or something like that. It was about basically a guy who has like an AI robot girlfriend.
Right.
And it's exactly what you're saying. It's like you don't have to deal with someone not like being irritating or someone rejecting you or someone like, and so you do the instant gratification and like it feels a little, it doesn't feel as good as getting the real thing, but it's so much easier. It's like probably feels a quarter as good as getting the real thing, but it's 50 times easier.
Yes. And so then it becomes, again, so anyone who's out there, if you notice, just if you're using ChatGPT for therapy or you're going to it a lot, that's probably a sign that you need to be able to sit with your emotions a little bit and just do the thing that we've talked about in here, which is like you want the intellectualized answer, you want the verbal, the words, the thing to do or not do, the advice. What you really need to do is be sitting with whatever that deeper feeling is. I'm I'm afraid. I'm feeling rejected. I'm having a hard time
Mm-hmm.
sitting in guilt or whatever it is. Like identify the emotion, find it in your body and sit with it. It's very powerful. It's like a superpower to be able to tolerate your own emotions without needing the instant gratification of the text back that you're waiting for or the therapist to tell you to validate you. And like she said, I haven't used ChatGPT in this way, but I imagine from what I'm hearing that it is
Mm-hmm.
validating pretty much everything that you're feeling.
Yeah. And I always think of that thing. I don't know if you've read this before, also about AI, how it's going to replace like all the entry level jobs.
Yeah.
And I actually think about that. And I actually, that makes me feel good in some ways because I'm like, it's replacing all the entry level jobs, right? So if it's replacing anyone who doesn't now have to take a course on Psych 101. But if you want it's not replacing a really good therapist.
Right.
It's replacing a person who took, like me maybe, who took psych and AP psych in high school or psychology in college. It's replacing that because it has the same knowledge quicker and faster and can regurgitate it to you, but it's not replacing the world's best therapist. It's just not able to do that.
Yes.
Entry level. So it's like if you want the lowest of the low of a certain thing, if you want the easiest, cheapest therapy, sure.
Yeah.
Maybe that's helpful.
I agree. And I'll tell you what it does well that hooks people. And this is one of the hardest things for us to do when we're listening to people in our life is it will say, one of the first things is like, that sounds really hard, or, that sounds like a really tough, it just like, I guess part of its programming is that it comes out with like a validating statement versus what might happen. Like if you go to Mike and you're like, well, I'm really frustrated that Ronnie keeps like chewing the corners of the furniture. And he might be like, well, that's because you
Right.
let
him do it before or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
He doesn't say to you, yeah, that sounds really frustrating. I would love to sit and just help you through some strategies on how to handle that. Right. And that's what the ChatGPT does is it's programmed to initially just be really like, wow, that's a hard situation you're in. Let's brainstorm some strategies together. Okay. And then you're like, yeah, sure. This, it feels very.
And that's probably what they teach you to do in your first year of and when you're training to become a therapist. Again, your entry level therapy session. That's probably the first thing you learned how to do.
Right. Listen, validate. Mm-hmm. But the truth is it's very hard for humans to do that with other people that are suffering. And this is why ChatGPT is great at it, because it's not a human and it doesn't have that reaction of like, this person that I love and care for is upset and I'm so antsy to like get to the punch and fix it
Mhm.
that I'm going to skip that step. So they don't need to skip that step because they're like, I don't really care about you.
Right.
So I'm not in a rush to help you. I'm going to follow the steps in the protocol. I feel like it's very intriguing in the beginning because it does that probably better than maybe when you turn to your partner or you turn to a friend. So that very initial piece, but yes, then it can get just really deep and addictive. And so I'm glad she wrote in. I would be really careful with this once in a while in a crisis situation. But again, like I said, a lot of therapists, if you're in a crisis, they'll be happy to. I mean, I don't want to speak for all therapists. I know that I do it. I'm here for my patients, when they are in a crisis mode, but I'm here for them in terms of like a long-term do it yourself
Right.
strategy. Like, I want you to learn to do this. I'm not here to do it for you so that eventually you don't need me as much anymore.
Right. Well, you're a well-balanced meal. It's like if they're
Right.
starving, they can have McDonald's, but
Yes.
in the long run, they should have more you should have more patience. Like
Right.
that's what you are. Yes.
Totally. Totally. So great question. This is some scary times. I do get a little pit in my stomach when I think about all this stuff and what it means for human connection. It's tough. I see it in my kids, and it's really hard as a parent to break that cycle because of instant gratification. Because
Yeah.
I want my kids to like be quote unquote happy. So sometimes that feels like letting them play whatever video game gives them like this dopamine hit in that moment that they're so excited that they're playing this video game. But I know in the long run, that's not really what they need. It's just kind of feels like survival.
Totally. It's so funny that you just said that because I was having like Mike and I are in like a ongoing tiff because Ronnie is not yet neutered, and so he continuously humps my leg. And Mike is like, you cannot let him keep doing that. And I'm like, I just want him to be happy. I just like feel bad. Like he has like the urge. I don't know what else he's gonna do. Like I just feel like I want him to be like obviously that's not the appropriate way for him to do that. I'm like, he doesn't have any dog friends here. It's just the two of us. We're kind of low energy. Like it makes sense. He's like, no.
Oh my God, I'm dying.
It's pretty disgusting.
That is like the dog equivalent of like me letting my kids play
video
games. Like just
because he's watching the dog. Like he's like, can you push him off of you? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, it'll be done
enjoying
soon.
himself. Oh my God. Mike's like, getting a little uncomfortable / jealous.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Oh
I just want him to be happy. But yeah,
it's
boundaries.
So true.
Yeah.
Whether it's a dog or a child.
That's why, I mean, it seems like, again, not to compare dog parenting to parenting, but I feel like I would imagine the hardest thing about parenting is that there's like these two things that are kind of going against each other of like your child's immediate happiness and what is best for them and probably you overall.
Yes, you both have to sit through their discomfort. That's my biggest parenting tip. And maybe you can use it for Ronnie too, is that it's good for your children to learn how to be uncomfortable. And I struggle with this every day. Like that's my mantra to myself. It's good for your children to learn how to be uncomfortable. And it's really hard. We want to keep fixing it because it's uncomfortable for us. So first, we need to learn how to be uncomfortable so that we can allow them to be uncomfortable.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. So you're if you can be uncomfortable yourself, you're more able to be uncomfortable with other people's discomfort. Sounds
yes, exactly.
Just comfortable with everyone being uncomfortable.
Yes. And then we can all just stop needing so many different ways to fix everything. And just,
Immediately, yes.
yes. All right.
Let's
Let's
do
move on.
a Betchicist. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah, I will read this. Hi, ladies. Love the podcast and very grateful for both of you. I'm writing in to gain advice on an ethical dilemma. I'm 28 years old, and a few years ago, my parents got a divorce because my dad was cheating. After everything came out, I found out he was essentially cheating on my mom the entire 25-year marriage. My dad has done nothing, quote, wrong to me specifically, but I can't help but truly hate seeing him, talking to him, etc., even though I know I love him. How wrong is it to be upset with someone if they wronged someone close to you, but not you? Thanks. My mom deserves better.
I like this question because I think it applies to this situation, but a lot of different situations. I think where someone has done something wrong to someone you know,
Mm-hmm.
but not to you. I do think it feels tricky ethically because they haven't done anything to you, but you kind of know that they're capable of doing this in general.
Totally. This really is one of those um, evolutionary, like psychological mechanisms that we have as humans. Because, when we were evolving, we evolved as tribes. And the tribes that were the most cohesive, the tribes that were the least selfish and the most like all for one for all, were the ones that beat out the selfish tribes, the ones that only cared about their own wounds and their own pain. So we've really evolved to this place where there are these moral concepts. Like there's a phrase that I always think about, that morality blinds and binds. So it's like that is what we have evolved to be. So even though if something wasn't really uh, didn't happen to us, we do feel this tendency to be protective over other people, even though it doesn't, logically make sense. And even sometimes when it's something that, this happens this starts in like fifth grade, like when so and so said something behind so and so's back, and now you feel like you need to protect that. You
Right.
can't talk to that person anymore, even though you probably did that yesterday to somebody else. Like you probably talked behind someone else's back, but.
Or even like, I feel like you feel it this way about celebrities. Like when you find out they've done something wrong, you're kind of like, well, I don't
Yes.
really like you anymore.
Yeah,
But they
there's
didn't
like
do anything to
literally
you.
shirts that are like, team whoever,
Right.
like you pick
Team
a side.
Jen, Team
Yeah.
Angelina, whatever it is. Yeah.
Totally. You pick a side. It's very ingrained in us to pick a side. I mean, look, I'll come back. That's like the big picture philosophical piece of this.
Yeah. This is obviously a little closer to home, but.
Yeah. And it does feel, I think in her situation, and I'm just going to normalize her feelings of wanting to be angry or feeling angry at her dad, is I'm sure he lied to her throughout that time. I'm sure he said he was in one place and he was someplace else. And there were moments where he wasn't being honest and truthful, or maybe spending time with his mistress that he wasn't spending time with them. Like there's more to it. I do think there is an aspect, when you cheat, that you are bringing that untrustworthiness and lying into the family dynamic in some way.
And you're kind of taking this picture that that the person who wrote in is 28 years old. She probably had a sense of what her family was that is now completely, she's going to completely having to revisit what she thought of as her whole family structure, or like the whole structure, that everything that she could think of growing up that maybe she thought was one way, which is now another, which I think also kind of throws you into a little bit of a crisis of self.
Totally. And I think that happens for most people in one way or another. Like their picture of like when you're growing up, you're in a bubble of whatever your home, your life. I mean, you spend time at friends' homes or other people's and you see how things are to an extent. But I do think there's that moment where you're like, oh, that was weird, or like, that, kind of burst the bubble of what I thought the idyllic version of my childhood
Mhm.
is. For some people that happens when you're 10. For some people that happens when you're 35. And it is hard to realize that like what you thought everything was, is different, or like there was kind of a lie going on or a falsehood. And maybe her mom was part of it. Maybe she totally was in the dark, but I'm sure there was some stuff that she was in denial of too. Like this is really tough. That's why I do think it is. We can talk about this next time, but um, it is really important, I think, to be as honest as you can with your kids and your family growing up within reason. Like I was going to say, maybe we'll talk about it next time. Brooks was asking me a lot of intricate birds and bees questions over
Mm.
the weekend,
Okay.
which maybe we'll talk about another time. But it's so hard to kind of straddle that line between like, I don't want to lie to him. I want him to know the truth so he's not like delusional, but I want to protect his innocence and his
Right.
childhood, and like not get him, ahead of himself in terms of his mind thinking about things that it might not be ready to think about. So I think that, you know, kind of plays into this with a parent where you're having these complicated relationship dynamics and you want to protect your kids. So you lie to them or hide from them. And, but yeah, as far as hating her dad or feeling really angry towards her dad, I totally normalize that. I think it's just part of human nature. And maybe it'll help to talk with him about it. I find that that has helped me in these types of situations, to just kind of let him know how she's feeling,
Right.
and let him, maybe he can apologize for lies that he told her, or maybe they can have a more honest conversation about where he was at or why he did that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess, is there resolution to that? Because she's like, I don't really want to talk to him. I hate seeing him. And it seems like a lot of the anger lies in the loyalty to her mom, of like, because she signs it, my mom deserved better.
Right.
So it's sort of like an anger on behalf of someone, and maybe a feeling of you're a person who could and did do this to someone that I love.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big part of it too. If you're capable of this type of extensive lying for 25 years, like maybe I just can't trust you.
Right.
Which
But
I
where do you
do.
go? I guess, where do you go from there if
Yeah,
you're her?
I think I know she doesn't want to. I get it. It's so awkward. It's uncomfortable, but I think she needs to talk to him. And I don't know that anything that he says is going to change, but sometimes I think when someone, even like we're talking about, like the, team Jen, or, whatever, like if you hear the story, if you spoke to the real people, you might feel less divisive on it. And I'm not
Right.
saying her dad's going to say something and she's going to be like, oh, now I understand why you
She
were
deserved
lying and
it.
cheating
Right.
for 25 years.
Right.
But maybe there is something that would make you feel just a little bit more like he's a human and not just in this category of like cheating, sociopath, who was capable of that. And maybe it won't. It's possible that it won't help. But I think just as maybe a life lesson of like, instead of writing someone off, especially if they're your father, to allow them to say whatever they have to say. And maybe he has no excuse or nothing, but he's just like remorseful, and that makes you feel a little bit better. Or he just kind of can say this was a big mistake, or I, understand how it could have hurt her, because she might be a little bit in denial of how that maybe affected her relationship with him. 25 years of having another relationship like that, I don't know. That's got to affect something
Right.
to do with the two
It
of you.
has to have manifested somewhere. And I mean, it's tough because it's not the kind of thing where I think he could say, I'm sorry, and then she would just get over it. Does feel probably not obviously the same extent as being cheated on yourself, but a sense of, I can't just let this go, even if you say sorry. So maybe it's just accepting the fact that it would take a while to get back to a place with her dad, again, assuming he's willing to work on it
And
and has
trying,
this, yeah,
right.
and has empathy for what you're going through, and trying that it might take a while to get back to a place where you feel that you don't harbor the like strong resentments and anger towards him. And I think that would kind of be like have to be accepted by both of you.
Right. And it might matter how he's handling it with her mom. I don't know how he's handling that, but maybe, how he moves forward. A lot of times after there is a betrayal like this, the behavior after, how you repair, how you move forward, how you handle being able to sit in those hard conversations where she can express her anger towards him, that can be reparative too. Like if he can tolerate and not only like the same way I deal with couples that have, infidelity. It's not just like, okay, it's your job to forgive, or, it's your job to be in the doghouse forever. It's like checking back in. How are you feeling today about this? Are you still feeling angry? Leaning for the father to lean into those uncomfortable emotions and check in with her. And maybe she has, things that she would like him to do to repair with her mom. I don't know, but opening the door to conversation and allowing him to do whatever little bits he can to repair, I think would be helpful, hopefully.
Yeah. Do you ever get people in therapy, couple like not like parent child in therapy?
No, not really. Not adult um parent child for the actually that's not true. I've had a handful, but it's usually more like when they're living in the same space together
Right.
and there's like tension in the home or poor behavior, like there's, because it's so easy to just avoid it
Mhm.
after they're grown and they're out. It feels so hard to want to, unless it's in your face every day, like a kid that's using drugs in your house or not coming home at night or being disrespectful. Usually people just take the route of least resistance, which is like, okay, you call me when you can,
Right.
when you feel
We're just
better.
not close.
We're just not
Kind of.
that close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless it's in your face where someone's like slamming doors, and
Right.
those are the parent children that come in, not usually when they could just avoid it if possible, which is kind of sad, but
That
that's
makes
the reality
sense.
of what I've seen. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that was helpful. Give us an update. And she says, how wrong is it to be upset with someone if they wrong someone else close to you, but not you? I think in this scenario, not wrong.
Yeah. In this scenario, I think it's really totally, I normalize it. Um, and I think in some ways, like it's it's coming from her. Sounds like it's not coming from the mom, which is oftentimes where it would come from.
Right.
Like the mom, being angry and kind of wanting the child to be angry on their behalf. Like this is genuinely coming from you. I think it's a natural emotion, especially when it's coming genuinely from her own heart and not being like pushed on her. So I would, yeah, allow yourself to have that. And I think to have a conversation with your dad about it if you have any interest in at some point retaining a relationship.
Yeah.